welcome to Globespan 24x7 as we meet again on our Monday night. New York, as usual, it's a place of uncertainty like Europe, I presume. One day it's cold, the other day it's warm. Today was warm and cold here in New York, so we have to live with it. We want to thank all our viewers for joining us tonight, and of course our sponsors, Nuhar Singh and our technical specialist, Devin Bisu. We want to also thank all our sponsors who have been contributing to this program, and we want to encourage you to continue as we bring you the news in Guyana and around the world. Tonight, we are very honored and privileged to have with us the former Prime Minister, former President, now Ambassador to Washington, Mr. Samuel Hines. Ambassador Hines, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you very much, Charles, and Euclid. I think of Asquith, though, is the name I know more often. Greetings, Easter greetings to all who are looking at this show, particularly colleagues and friends and old comrades in Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Yes, today being a public holiday in Guyana as we had kite flying, I'm sure many of our citizens are still at the park and at the seawall and the beaches having fun. To my co-host, Dr. Rose, welcome.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome, Honorable Ambassador.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Ambassador, you, as we were told, you were the longest Prime Minister in Guyana, and then you succeeded Dr. Jagan and then became Prime Minister again, and then you retired from politics, I presume. Why did Samuel Hines take up a new job as ambassador instead of enjoying his retirement?
Well, I think the people recognized that maybe I was interfering, writing letters in the press and getting into the way. So I needed something to do. I think so very nicely they offered me this job, and I'm very thankful to have had it. And I think I can do a good job. I think I could make a good contribution to it.
But Mr. Ambassador, and that's a very fair point, well, didn't that prevent other Guyanese, maybe who are younger, not that you're not young, but to give them opportunity to explore the world of diplomacy when, as you know, there are a lot of Guyanese who are also qualified for the job?
Well, I guess sometimes you go with the older guys, sometimes you go with the younger persons. I didn't make the decision, but I guess if I was making the decision, I could see that I would weigh up between some younger options, some older options. Maybe I'll guess that maybe they thought let's start off with a safe pair of hands in Washington, and certainly people are being groomed and will soon follow me.
Oh, excellent. Mr. Ambassador, the ambassador to Washington, I believe, is one of Guyana's most important appointment for ambassadorship. What are some of the things that as ambassador in Washington are you responsible for?
Well, certainly the relationships between the government and people of Guyana with the government and people of the USA. You know, our accreditation documents more or less is from one president to the other president. With the presence of COVID, however, and with the US administration in Washington still formally closed or not yet formally open, the accreditations took place by paper eventually. I came here last June, took the job and got on the job 1st of July. And then I think within that same week, some 40 outstanding new ambassadors were accredited by paper. And we're being promised by the State Department in virtual meetings from time to time with various officers in the State Department that they are aware that the picture of the ambassador with the president in the White House is something very worthy and aspired to have. And so they are to arrange such a meeting sometime to make an occasion available sometime. So yes, we are, as the ambassador here, relationships with the U.S. is right at the top, and that includes with people at the Congress and also people within the administration there, and then around the states itself. There had been the practice by the U.S. State Department to send ambassadors on tours around the U.S. from time to time, but that too has been on suspension because of COVID. Nonetheless, there are also like voluntary groups around the Atlantic Council, the VEN, and others. And towards November, when the COVID was dwindling away, fading away, a number of occasions started to be had, and I attended some. But then with Omicron coming in, things closed down again, and we have now, I think attempts are being made to open up again at this time. There's also the Organization of American States, which is an organization of all the states of the two Americas, excepting at this time Cuba has been out for some time. I think maybe since the 1990s or sometime Cuba was suspended. So that organization too has been meeting virtually. Last November, there was a call to get back to in-person meetings. We've had one or two in-person meetings, but we're back at virtual and calling again for getting back to in-person meeting. People may know too that the Summit of the Americas, which is held every 3 years and was to be held last year, I think the previous occasion was 2018. It's now to be held in Los Angeles in June, and there are two more meetings, what they call the summit meetings, coming up soon towards the end of April here, and I think the second week of May. So those are things that are happening.
And Mr. Ambassador, you overlook any other ambassadors of Guyana or High Commission?
The consulates come under our, we overlook the consulates. The one in New York, I've been able to visit there during the time that a group came up from Guyana, spent a week, including the current Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, and they visited in Florida and then in New York, and I joined them in New York. I visited the consulate there, met with the people in the consulate. I am been in contact with our man in Florida, and there is a lady, an honorary consul in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are in the process of completing all the work with Mr. Lufti Hassan, who is our honorary consul in Houston, Texas. There are still a few things. He's already been accepted, but there's still a few things to be completed. And with the situation of everything being virtual, it does lead to more delay and a few more back and forths before certain matters are sorted out. So that's our situation. We had someone out in California, Los Angeles, Mr. D'Oliveira, but he had proceeded. I think he got married maybe for the second time, and he proceeded with his wife to the Philippines. And we have a new gentleman there. I can't recall his name right now, and I'm not so sure if all the particulars have been completed with him, but we'll have somebody in Los Angeles. And I think we're open to having persons wherever there's enough cluster of Guyanese diaspora for a start, and also where there may be particular commercial interest developed. You may imagine that we needed an honorary consulate in Houston, in in Houston because of the regular connections of the people related to the oil industry or blossoming oil industry in Guyana.
What is the relationship between the UN ambassador and the ambassador in Washington?
Well, really, there is no relations. It's just the United Nations is a group, and the UN could have been in any place in the world. It may be like DC, and you may recall that there are times when I think there's some US commitment with the UN being in the US. There's a UN commitment that people who have a valid right to visit the UN, go to the UN, are allowed to go to the UN. Say, I can remember Chavez going and Castro going in the early days, and maybe other people too that the US may not have otherwise given visas to. They provide visas for them to attend. Although from memory, on particularly bad persons, where the US says we're not granting this person a visa, I think on those occasions, meetings had moved to Geneva on a few occasions so that the persons who are relevant could attend.
Mr. Ambassador, I was referring to like the Guyana ambassador to the UN and the ambassador in Washington. Is there any collaboration between the two? Like you overlook the consulate, anything with that office in the UN?
I guess you're talking now about the practical things. Of course,
yeah.
The UN.
Our ambassador to the UN.
PR in New York there, they work, the things that they collaborate directly with, accommodate each other with in New York. They're both in New York physically, but one is with the United Nations and one is to the USA, right? They're two different functions. One relates to the USA, the consulate, and the UNPR relates to the United Nations. So they do cooperate, collaborate, and cooperate. And similarly, our two positions are quite different. Again, I relate to the US and the OAS. Ambassador Carlin Rodriguez relates to the United Nations, but we do speak because there's some things that are common and overlap.
I got you.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you, Charles. Before I ask you a question, I just want to make a public statement. Yesterday, I was at the ceremony for my friend, a memorial service for my friend's son who died a few weeks ago in Florida. It was a Hindu ceremony, and it was very, very good. But soon after the ceremony was over, people resort to eating and so forth and so forth. But I was visited, I should say, or I was there and several persons surrounded me and was telling me, they did not ask me, they were telling me that I am working for the government of Guyana. And they put a salary cap, how much money I'm making and so forth. So I want to make it clear
worse. I can't imagine anything better for you.
I know, but I want to make it clear to all and sundry.
For much.
I know, but I want to make it clear to all and sundry that I am not working for the government of Guyana. I'm not employed by the government of Guyana. And let me say this, those obvious to hear, let them hear. And please, my fellow Guyanese citizens in Queens, New York, Richmond Hill, in Brooklyn, New York, in New Jersey, and Toronto, I am not employed by the government of Guyana. So please stop your propaganda. Please stop it. Okay, Mr. Ambassador, let me ask you my first question. I don't know if you know it, but you can say whether you know it or not. How many Guyana consulates are in the United States, roughly?
Roughly, I would say this time 4.
4?
Yes.
You have one in New York?
New York,
Atlanta,
Miami, and Houston is 80% there. It should be open, we hope, in time for the OTC, the Offshore Technology Conference.
And you're aware that there are a number of Guyanese in California too. Why not one in California?
I think there was one. I did say in my opening talk there that
Okay.
Mr. D'Oliveira was there, but he had moved on to Philippines, and I think it may be a Mr. Degar or someone else who's there now. But I think that matter is being sorted out now. I think he's advertised that I promised to get up to him sometime soon, go pay him a visit, and I certainly want to go out there to Los Angeles.
Okay, that's good. Now, are these consulates staffed by permanent people or volunteers?
A consulate is largely volunteers. They're not. The honorary consulates are American citizens. They cannot be Guyanese citizens, and there are restrictions on the amount of support they get. In fact, that support has to be that you're providing to consulates has to be notified to the State Department beforehand and approved, and so on, because they shouldn't become agents of another country. They're American citizens and they can't become agents of a country. Sorry, let me say those are the honorary consulates, but the consulate general in New York, those are staffed by Guyanese. So honorary consulates are generally Americans, citizens, and the consul general is Guyanese.
So there's only one consul general in the United States.
Yes, there's only one.
And could that person be an American citizen, a Guyanese American, or do not have to be or cannot be a citizen of Guyana? Of the United States.
They have to be a citizen of Guyana.
They can't be an American citizen.
They cannot be an American citizen.
Okay, thanks. Now, Mr. Ambassador, you took this job, you said, as of last year, July.
Yes.
My understanding is that in order to establish good relationship with the host country and to elevate Guyana's interest in the country, that's the role of an ambassador, partially the role of an ambassador. Yes. What have you done so far to establish good relationship with between Guyana and the United States and to elevate Guyana's interest in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think I've done as much as is allowed in the present circumstances. I was speaking about the COVID issue. There's a particular thing we did. We on the question of the accusations that were being made against us, against this government, and let me just say that it's obvious that I'm a political appointee and not a career diplomat. And we know that generally diplomats come in two types or two flavors. They are the political appointed ambassadors and they're the career ambassadors, and I'm a political ambassador. I think that we should make that clear from the beginning. So when there were the allegations, particularly following the last elections about our administration being anti-black and so on, and Mr. Burke in New York and so on, we did take some steps. In particular, one thing is that our Minister for Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, Mr. Gail Teixeira, she wrote a very comprehensive response to those allegations, and we at the embassy here, we managed the sending of that document to every member of Congress. I think there might have been some total of 700 persons. That might be something you can put a finger on, a handle on that we have done. Other than that, I have been present at a number of occasions that where the administration was open, although they were mostly things to do with presentations by candidates that the US government was putting up for various posts, either in the OAS or in the world at large at UN level, and also on the ceremonial occasions of signing books of condolences with the passing of Miss Albright recently, and earlier on, former gentleman there, I'm slipping my name, from Jamaica, of Jamaica parentage, who passed on. So those.
Oh, you're talking about Colin Powell.
Colin Powell, Mr. Colin Powell. So those are the things. I did meet Congressman Meeks at one of the occasions. I think of the Atlantic Council or some other one of the groups. We're still to get to the Hill itself, directly to Congress, and maybe directly. We've met with people in the administration, so I won't say that, but to get to Congress. And I say again that I don't think the administration and the Congress have yet been formally reopened. But I know that meetings are occurring, but they are not yet formally reopened. So it's not very, not much traffic, shall I say, is happening in those areas just yet. They're virtual meetings, and yes, we attend the virtual meetings, the virtual briefings put on by the US. The embassy has been attending those. I have been attending those.
I just want our audience to know that former Army General Colin Powell and Madeleine Albright, who we spoke about, both were Secretary of States in the Bush and Clinton administration, respectively. Now, Mr. Ambassador, could you tell our audience, people always guess and don't know, and I don't know for a fact, what your office staff is like in Washington, D.C. After you, is there a first secretary? Is there, what the staff is like?
Okay. We have a small staff, relatively small staff, but there are others that are smaller and many that are bigger. But we have a second in command there, our DCM, Deputy Chief of Mission. We have 2 additional diplomatic officers. We have two persons in accounting area. We have 2 drivers. We have 2 persons in the consular area, and the consular area there deals with passports, birth certificates,
affidavits, and so forth.
And unfortunately, or not unfortunately, we don't talk about it, but they handle matters with people to be deported and that sort of things. And then we have a receptionist, and we have some drivers. So if you add that up, I think it's like 11 or some number like that altogether.
Good, very good. Let me get to, we're going to get to politics as you wanted to discuss, but let me get to another diplomatic question here. As you know, last week Guyana abstained from voting at the United Nations to remove Russia as a member of the United Nations Human Rights Commission.
Yes.
Did anyone ask you for your advice, or were there any interactions prior to the vote between you and officials in the State Department?
Well, I can tell you what has been happening on the at the OAS. We've had 2 resolutions or motions condemning the action of Russia. One, I think the day after it happened, and then we had another one in March, and there is another motion that is largely agreed to and is going to be presented at the OAS on this coming Thursday. Yes, so at least at the OAS level, which of the America is a member of the OAS, we've had those relationships, and so that's there. At the level of the United Nations, I think we had been came out also. We had come out previously against what Russia had done in invading Ukraine. On this occasion, our president has spoken to it, and we may recall that I think some 7 CARICOM members had supported that motion, I think, to take Russia out of the UNHCR, and some 7 members had abstained. Guyana had abstained at that time, and as our president has explained, certain things, certain steps had already been taken and were in motion at the time that this particular resolution came up, and Guyana had the feeling that that we should have held our hand until that matter had been progressed enough or had been addressed explicitly. But there should be no doubt at all that Guyana is very much against and feels very horrible about the invasion of Ukraine by Russia.
As a former president, prime minister, and now ambassador, do you think that the decision to abstain from voting at the United Nations for or against was the right decision? Do you think the abstention was right, in your opinion?
Let me say, if I was in the spot there that President Ali is in, I think I most certainly would have done much the same thing. Yes, I think I would have done much the same thing when I heard what he has said.
Okay. Let me get to a semi-political question before my colleague comes in. Good governance includes accountability, transparency, collaboration, etc. Do you think we have good governance in Guyana at the moment?
I certainly do, sir. I certainly do. Good governance also requires effectiveness. Things have to get done also. So there is this tension between having to get things done. You know, there's usually this saying, the buck stops here at the head, whether it's the chairman of a company or the president of a country, the buck stops there. A lot of things are you know, quite often they're fairly evenly balanced, and someone has to eventually take a decision. You have to move forward, you have to do something. So I think we have good governance in Guyana. And I would say that you can check it out by looking at the effects. Look at the effects. When we got into office back in 1992 and got housing program going again, a lot of people used to accuse us of preferring our supporters, and in particular Indo-Guyanese and so on. And we said, okay, check it out. And even before that, I remember Minister Indra Chandrapal working with Henry Jeffrey. They introduced the idea of lotteries, you know, putting your hands in bag. If there are 100 house lots to go and there are 1,000 people eligible, where they put their hand in the bag, 100 have a house lot number. So whether you get a house lot or not, it depended on luck, let us say, the lottery. And the particular lot you get, whether it's a nice one at the corner or deep in the center, also depended on that. And that, and it was good that they ended up doing things that way, because if you were going to do it any other way by somebody making a selection, it would be almost impossible to wave away any idea that they made that selection because of other reasons and so on. So you have to be conscious about the people who want things to be open. They want that nobody is being given preference in front of them. Let me say also about our program, our attitude to helping, assisting children in school. We had that program that we started, giving, I think, $15,000 amount or $10,000 a year to every school child. Every child in school, 170,000. There is no way that could have ended up being preferential to groups. But it was replaced. It was replaced by the program of bicycles and buses and boats and so on. And that kind of program was, I think, certainly open to questions about preferences and using it to lead people in certain directions. So I would say that our programs generally go to larger number of people, and I think that our governance, we should be given a better mark. The PPP Civic should be given a better mark on governance. This is not, and let me just point out one thing. We do things differently from the other people. Yes, our choices are different, but that doesn't mean to say that governance is poor. We have to separate questions of where you don't, where you may disagree with what is being done, and saying what is being done is corrupt. You must try to separate the two things. So that would be the kind of general answer that I would give to the question about whether Guyana has good governance. I can speak a long time with it. Certainly, we do have a preference too for investments, and that goes back all the way to Dr. Jagan and the 1962 budget. I would say a budget that first kind of brought politics in Guyana and maybe Dr. Jagan to my attention, where those of us who are old like me would recall that he had introduced some taxes to go towards a development fund, and it was used as the opportunity to create the first set of disturbances that we had in 1962, fires and burnings and so on, and lootings, the first one. And I remember alumni of my people, and they would have been mainly the Georgetown, more middle class, more Afro-Guyanese crowd, Portuguese too, and so on, commercial crowd. And they were saying, Chetty wants us to do things that our children and grandchildren should be doing. But that struck me, maybe because I was 17, 18 years old doing my A-level and so on, and feeling a little nationalistic and proud and so on. And I said, but we do need to have some little money for ourselves and do our own thing. And maybe because I'm a country boy, really a country boy, and maybe still a country boy, I felt that way. And in 1962. And if you and others would have seen press conference by Vice President Jagdeo in the process of the budget this year, you would see that he put the comparisons where up to 2015, we were spending, in our budgets, the money went so much to current expenditures and so much to investment type things, investing in people and in infrastructure, in health and education and infrastructure. And when the coalition came in, the situation was greatly turned around. And here in our budget, since we've been back in, we've gone back to significant investments, larger investments into education and health and infrastructure, putting these things in place. So we have policy, we have differences in approaches, differences in policies. They don't necessarily mean corruption. They don't necessarily mean poor governance. Decisions have to be taken. You have to move forward. You cannot be hung up all the time. We see it with the arrangement with for the confirmation of Chancellor and Chief Justice. I think all of us, both the PPPC government at the time and the PNC in opposition, I guess the leaders and everybody, I think went into the arrangement there for to have agreement, concurrence and agreement in these appointments. But since then, it has meant that nobody gets confirmed. So you see, that could not. That's a tolerable situation, I would say, and I'm talking as me now. It's a tolerable situation. We've been living with it, but there are many other things that could not be that way. You have to move on. You have to move on, and so that's there. There will always be that tension, and therefore I think, we have always been that way, trying to win support of people, win understanding of people, so that in those areas where we have to take a decision, that there would be understanding, maybe grudging acceptance. Let's go along with it. Let's see what will happen. And we have the next elections anyhow. If it's looking bad, we're going to change them out. So,
Charles, over to you. Charles, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Ambassador, we're in Guyana, so we want to first give our congratulations to our Guyanese athletes in Carifta, the Carifta Games. Anisha Gibbons made us proud, and so also is Atoya Harvey. We also have Narissa McPherson, Javon Roberts, and others. They have really made Guyana proud, so we want to salute them as we continue this program. Congratulations to you guys. You made us proud. Continue your good work.
and
Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned, parliamentary work and so on. And you've been there from 1992 to 1996, I believe, when you became president.
97 March, 6th
97,
March.
and then you had a break then, and you went back to parliament after the election when you were prime minister. Recently, and as you mentioned, we couldn't appoint the Chief Justice and the Chancellor because of the arrangement that is put in our laws. Recently, the PPP moved, and I'm not against PP, Mr. Ambassador, please forgive me if I count that way, but recently the PPP moved to change the Public Accounts Committee quorum. Isn't that now room for gridlock again, where if the PPP does not want to be in one of that committee in the hearing, they will stay away, there is no quorum. And the same thing if the PNC don't want to be in something that might be wrong, showing bad to them, they might stay away. Are we creating more gridlock, or are we getting things done?
That's a good question, and you're asking me, say, from the other side. I think we will have to try situations and see how they come about, and people will be looking on and learning and taking positions. Things are always evolving and moving on, and you have to keep trying new things, new situations, and see how they go. So yes, as you say, there may be those sorts of concerns with that change. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. And we have a situation too, which is a little bit not usual, because here we have the government. I think the annual reports that are now being considered, the opposition of today was the government of that day, and the government of today was the opposition then. And the government usually has to be almost defending the what was done, kind of. So we also have a particular situation at this moment which may have led to particular circumstances there. I have not been following it very closely.
But I know, Mr. Ambassador, as you said, you're a political appointed by the government.
Yes.
Isn't this a backward move that they changed the quorum? Because as Mr. Christopher Ram said today, I don't know if you read the newspaper today, if you had some time, this is now gridlock. The only opportunity the public has to know what's going on in government is through the PAC. And if the PAC is stymied by not having a quorum, the Guyanese public will be denied the opportunity to know what's going on in their government.
Yes, and I hope that doesn't develop. I hope that the quorums are made, and it does. We get on with auditing those accounts, and I think those accounts are still might still be for the period when the current opposition to the government. I have not been keeping that close check on it. But we should always remember too that Finally, the last judgment on everything we do is the political judgment at the regular elections. And so one always has to think about that, and the population always has recourse to show their approval or not at that time. So we always have to be conscious that there's this final evaluation as to whether things are going generally good or generally bad, whether generally good decisions are being made or generally bad decisions are being made. So I would say, let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes.
All right. Mr. Ambassador, when you were Prime Minister, you were in charge of the energy sector, GPL.
Yes.
In today's paper, they have come up, the Prime Minister now has said that GPL will purchase 50 megawatt of power for the national grid.
Yes.
From heavy oil, that is from generators. Wouldn't it be better, in your view, for us to invest in solar energy that can come into play within 6 months, rather than, because they're telling us that this 50 megawatt will be purchased in the next 3 years? Why don't we allow the private sector to come in with the solar energy, with wind, with water, whatever it is, fill the gap, private sector money, not government spending? Is that something that you would do?
Well, I think if you go back to what you said that there's an advertisement to buy 50 megawatts of power. That implies it's going to be an independent power producer, IPP. That implies an IPP. So it would be a private person or a private group putting up a power station of 50 megawatts. If it's 50 megawatts delivered, they probably have to put in about 65 megawatts to conform 50 megawatts or something like that. But anyway, there will be a private group putting in a power station. This power station, you say, would be on heavy oil. The power stations on heavy oil probably have a good prime life for 20 years. So I would say maybe it's been thought through. I was not involved in thinking it through, but it has probably been thought through that there is a 20-year window for an IPP. Of course, I know too, and I've been working, I was advocating and pushing along with hydro projects at Amila in the first place, and there were one or two others that were looking good also. So, and we know too, there is the gas to shore, but it could be that the people who are plotting the likely demand, high level projection and medium level and low level projection and power availability, they probably see a gap. I'm going to assume they see a gap for 50 megawatts for a 20-year period, and they've come out with that. But it is private money. It is private money. It's not.
Yeah, well, Mr. Prime Minister, what I'm trying to get at is this is economics. Who will want to spend millions of dollars for 50 megawatt for only 3 years, because only 3 years they guarantee supply? What will they do with the equipment after the 3 years?
No, I think it's much longer than that.
Not according to the newspaper.
What the newspaper said for a 3 year? Okay. Well, if the newspaper said, I didn't see it. If it is for a 3 year supply, then it is probably a mobile thing, like mobile generators, 2 megawatts. It used to be like 2.5 megawatts were the largest sizes at that time that would be brought in. It would be more or less for a mobile unit. What's the word? The word slipping me now. I've been away from it for some time. But basically, it would be like the units that we got, say, from Caterpillar. They came in to fit in a certain time. If it's for 3 years, yes, that would be it. But as you told me it, I thought it was for a particular slot in there. And
no, it says the newspaper says, Mr. Ambassador, that the national grid to project by March 2023 for a period of 3 years.
Okay.
That is
well, then that necessarily means mobile units. It could be a barge, and I know barge, for people of my age group, that's a terrible word, but there are barge units about. that you could retain for 50 megawatts. They would bring them in and they will hook them up. Yes, so I would say that probably is for a 50 megawatt barge, which may have installed in it maybe 65 megawatts, so as to ensure that that 50 megawatts would always be available, or would be available for 95% or whatever it is of the time. So I would say that sounds like a barge unit, and it fits that slot. It fits that slot, that 3-year slot, that 3-year gap between projections of power available and projections of power demand. I would say that. I have not been.
And that's my point, Mr. Ambassador, is that, and I mentioned it in one of our, I believe honest, yeah, go on, sorry.
I was going to say, to fill that need, to fill that 3-year need, it would, whilst this bringing in a barge would be more costly than if you had units there for a long time, it would still be cheaper than if you brought in the units yourself and put them in, and then after 3 years didn't have them. And actually, the going to PV for that arrangement, as far as I know, would even be much more costly, because PV for photovoltaic is much higher cost capital-wise, initial-wise. And as far as I know, up to now, whilst PV is transportable, movable, I guess it could be moved about, but I hadn't yet run into any reports of mobile PV stations. PV groups, if I remember, you used to need initially 10 acres per megawatt. They need now maybe 5 acres per megawatt, or numbers like that. I can't recall, I can't be sure, but those are the numbers I'm hearing. So I don't think you could get a PV solution that way. I don't think. I think for a 3-year gap, I would say studies would show that this approach is probably the best approach. They're probably 50 megawatt supplying barges around that could be had at this time, and they'd come in. I would say they'd probably be having maybe no more than 10 megawatt size units, maybe nothing smaller than 2.5 megawatts. If I were to guess, I would be seeing a barge with maybe no smaller units than 2.5 megawatts, and maybe no bigger unit than 10 megawatts, and maybe all the units would be the same, except for the maybe any auxiliary ones they had for local arrangements there, or something, pumps and so on. Maybe that's what I would guess. That's what I would expect. So okay. I think it's a good approach for the particular need of a 3-year gap to be filled. But this leads me. You were saying before about why didn't we do it in why don't you get the private persons to come in and do it? And actually that reminded me that there were quite a lot in the papers that, look, the government has put in the money for the hydro in the budget. Why then don't the government just do the project and done? They got the money in the budget. Why don't they do the project and done? And don't worry to go to bids and all of that, or the kind of bids they were doing to people coming to bring finance and build and design and build. But the answer to that really, and I think those people who were saying so should have known, or they got carried away, that the government, again for good governance, every cent that we spend, particularly us of the PVPC, goes through the budget. It goes through the budget, so that even money is borrowed previously from the IDB or World Bank or America or whoever lends money to do certain things, it has to be spent, or the expenditure has to be accounted for and passed through the budget, so that it is there for all the accounting and checks and the PAC that seek to ensure that money is being well spent in the sense that it's being spent on the project that it's being spent for and how much it costs and so on, and projections, how it compares with what was projected and so on. I say that to again distinguish between the thing that is done and how well the thing is done. The thing that is done is more policy matter, and I know that there's been a lot of mixing up in that in Guyana. You do something and people feel that's not to be done and it becomes corruption, but it isn't. It's when the money is supposed to be spent this way and it is not spent that way, or it is spent very badly in that way, yes, maybe then there are issues of corruption and governance involved. But I'd like to point that out, that all monies, even monies that are loans and monies that come in through people financing projects, are accounted for by passing them through the budget. And I think many people know that.
Mr. Ambassador, and and many Guyanese feel this way, that whether it's the PP government or the PNC, they do have the country at heart. They want to see development. And I believe every government wants to do that. But what happened in the process, Mr. Ambassador, is that the government of the day believe that they're the custodian of all knowledge. And everyone else, it's noise, right? And I'm saying this genuinely because 50 megawatt of power from the generators for 3 years, that will bring in only a few people can do that. We know we need X amount of megawatt power to power our industry, and we are growing. And if we set up solar farms across Guyana, competition reduces price. If someone will come at 50 megawatt, most likely it'll be one or two persons, and the price will be the same. The cost to produce will be the same. If we have 100 investors come and invest solar farm or wind farm, guess what, Mr. Ambassador? The price of electricity will plummet. Why is the government doing that?
I hear you, but look, we're talking here about a solution for this specific case of a gap of 3 years for 50 megawatts. So there are programs to put in solar in many places. Solar costs a lot initially, and the initial charge is much, but then you don't have to pay for fuel. You have batteries and so on, all that in the initial cost. But this is for a 3-year period. When you project demand and you project how much will be produced, you have a gap there for 3 years of about 50 megawatts. So you want to answer that. We have hydro coming, at least one hydro, maybe a second hydro. We have the gas to shore. All of those things are coming along, and I'm sure they've been put into the projections, but there's this immediate gap. And you fill that immediate gap by people who have made investments in power barges. I think that from what I hear from you, going on what you have said, what we will be looking for there is a power barge that would deliver 50 megawatt, 95% and more.
Okay. All right, Dr. Rose?
Yes, Honorable Ambassador, you are from Linden, am I right?
I was born in Alexander Village from parents who came from Maikoli. And I
grew up in Linden.
I lived and worked in Linden from 1967 to 1992.
Okay.
So I was in Linden from 67 to 92, yes.
The residents of Linden believe that the PP had neglected them when they were there for 23 years. They also believe that APNU did turn their backs on them because of some disagreement. Now, my question to you is this. Linden needs development, but what type of development do you think will advance Linden and make it at least the second largest city in the country? It is the second largest city in the country, with about 48,000 people, larger than Amsterdam. So what type of development you think should be going to Linden in order to improve the lives of the people at Linden?
Let me first say that we of the PPPC have never neglected Linden. Linden has probably taken proportionally more of our time per head than any other part of Guyana. And I would say from that, it so happened that when our current vice president returned and took up work in Guyana, probably about 88, 89, he was in that planning unit under Mr. Haslin Paris at that time, who had come down to Georgetown. And so actually he spent quite a bit of time in Linden with a team with other persons, a number of whom, 2 or 3, were children of Linden who had gained degrees in economics. And so from that very early days, he had been very much attuned to Linden. And I was there too. And our big challenge, remember that when we went into office, we met a covenant, an agreement between the outgoing PNC administration and the IMF World Bank people, in which they put in some money and they put in a foreign manager then, MINPROC, and the arrangement was, the commitment was that after 2 years, the manager for MINPROC would make a statement whether he saw the operations becoming profitable or not. If he saw it becoming profitable, the government was committed to put it up for privatization immediately. And if not, the government was to close it. Money had been spent. There had been subsidies going in since 1976 or so into the bauxite operations, and they was not to be continued. In fact, it had been more or less effectively stopped. When MINPROC said in 1994 that they didn't see it becoming profitable, what did we do? We didn't just go ahead and say, here it is, we carry out orders that the PNC had committed the government and people of Guyana to. No, we didn't. We didn't. We found ways to keep the operation going by all sorts of things. They had a name for it, what they called off-budget expenditures and so on, maybe using money from the GGMC and the other areas. We did things to try and keep things going. And I would say the World Bank, IMF people were aware, and I presume these things happen. You get to know people, they're aware, and they don't make too much noise. They tolerate things going, and we kept the bauxite operations going largely by toleration with the World Bank, IMF, the IDBs, and the financing groups. And also, we had to be making big efforts to keep it going and making arrangements for it. And eventually, as we know, the OMIs came in. But let me speak to the LEAP program that we got going, because there was that arrangement with the European Union or the EEC before, the European Economic Commission and so on, where they funded once or twice some of these old legacy, mainly mining industry or forestry or something. And when it wasn't successful, they then switched around and came up and funded a program to develop otherwise, other than that earlier one. And so we had the LEAP program that came up. The LEAP program, Linden Economic Advancement Program. At first, we tried to get a program for like 25 to 30 million euros, and that moved along a certain way. It had a number of infrastructure things in it, in particular, a upgraded road between Linden to through Millie's hideout to that place on the Berbice River there. Yes, not to that area. But they then said, the EEC then said, look, this is not a program for infrastructure development. This is a program for changing people's mentality. And that's what we're spending money on in this program. Change people from thinking from their past about living in a company town, where you're born in a company hospital, in a company cradle, and you go down to grave in a company, in a coffin made in the company carpenter shop. We're changing mentality. People now must be doing things and moving things and getting on. So the focus was changed, and more or less nearly all we kept, trying to get in as much infrastructure type thing as we could. On the other side, tried to keep it going nearly all into courses, people coming and teach people and, changing their emotions and so on, changing their outlook. So that was how LEAP went along. And then there was the LEAF part to provide some funding to get projects going. So that has been it. Well, let me tell you as an example, there was a team from England came in at the time when Blair was Prime Minister, and it had a leader from the Labour Party. And he said to me, we were talking, and he said, I came from a town that was a coal town in England. Now there's no more coal. Mrs. Thatcher killed all coal in England. And maybe the age of coal in England had come and gone. Coal was dead. Maybe it had to be killed. It was dead. And now in the coal town, we were a good coal town. We had good standard of living. Now we have an even better standard of living. But if you ask anybody, what's replaced coal? There's nothing, no one thing that replaced coal. There are many, many things that happen now. He says, so in terms of materially, we're better off now. But Thatcher didn't have to be so bloody in ending coal, breaking the union and breaking things down. But I read in some other management books, actually, because it was something I would have been interested in. I remember the arguments of some manager in books, some gurus who said, when you come to those times, the quicker, the bloodier, and the dirtier that you make the change, the better it is, because you make a quicker change, rather than this, people hang on for generations, maybe. You have the same issue in the US with the old the old iron tongues and coal tongues and steel tongues too. A lot of them we would have been related to in our bauxite, refractory bauxite business. So we'd known about them too. But and Trump came along and said, President Trump came along and said more or less, he's going to restore them there, and but it hasn't happened. Things have moved on. Technology and all sorts of things have moved on. So the big problem for Linden, in fact, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Kim Ki-soon, the two got on reasonably well together, and every year they held a conference with a bauxite at the Kim Ki-soon's hotel there with a bauxite. And after 2 times or so, I said, my issue now on with a bauxite is not about bauxite, it's about finding other things, many other things that we could do in Linden and getting people of the mindset to do it so that bauxite becomes a total economic decision. It's no longer an emotional political decision. If you don't have choices, you're really not making a decision. You're not making a decision if you don't have choices. So the thing for Linden is to look to other things. And we're working at it. We've been working at it. We've had many starts, and that's one of the things one has to accept. There will be many starts, and the usual books from America say that maybe in 2 years, 50% of the starts would be gone down, would not be there anymore. They would not be making it. You have what you need. So the answer is to have really many starts and try many things. Certainly, Linden is on the road to the interior, and we put a lot of effort into getting the road into Lethem, so that at least there's traffic every day into Lethem, and that's going to grow business to it. But then when things happen in Linden, the thing I remember, some people, the Takatu guest house people in Lethem, at a certain time had made investments, that had received orders. It's a great place now, the Takatu Guest House in Linden. But up comes something, and the bridge was blocked. and people couldn't go. They had to now find back all that money to refund people, but they would have bought up things for the people to come to stay at the hotel. They had to find back the money to refund, having already made the investments. And so those things are problematic. We understand them. Myself and former president, now vice president, we spent a number of times out at the bridge where people can't understand. People who have been, and maybe if I didn't go through the training I had and the experience I had, you can't understand where this place has been making. My father's family did coopers and blacksmiths and wheelwright. And I think in the 1950s, my father was thinking that one of our three brothers would continue the tradition of cooper, blacksmiths, wheelwrights for donkey carts and bull carts. He was thinking that, and I think he felt very, very much rejected or whatever when we didn't. There was no indication that we would be going down the family road. So I understand it's a very difficult situation when a business. And if you want to, I would recommend, if people are still thinking in terms of bauxite and not moved away, in about the 1980s, I saw a Jamaica Bauxite Institute report which made a life cycle study of various bauxite situations. And when you read that one, Guyana was already dead. It was only left for it to close its eyes and go into the grave.
Okay.
When you look at people because and so on and so on. So the position is, our people, we have to work at getting our people in Linden with open minds to new things and to get on and to try new things, to take an attitude of incorporating into Guyana, joining and partnering with the rest of Guyana and the rest of the world too. We have to get that kind of attitude in.
Mr. Honorable Ambassador, I want to turn to the oil contract. It was signed by the Granger administration, and they hid it for 2 years. It took Kaiser News publisher Glenn Lal to pressure the government. And after 2 years, they released the contract. It is deemed the worst contract ever signed by the government in the entire world. Mr. Lal is a leading critic of the contract, and he pressured the APNO administration to renew the contract. They have not budged. During the campaign, the PP campaigned on renewing the contract. They might be upset with me saying this, but this is what they campaign on. After 18 months, not a word from them. And Mr. Lal continued to pressure the government to renew the contract. He has even taken the government and ExxonMobil to court because he felt that we're giving away our oil resources and other natural resources. What would you advise the government to do with the oil contract?
Well, I feel a little bit, what you said, that I'm involved in this matter because I was minister responsible for the GGMC that from 92 to 2011. And whilst petroleum and forestry were the responsibilities for the president, the administrative part of the petroleum developments was done by the GGMCs, which I was responsible. So, and actually SO came, I remember when SO came, I think 97, 98 or sometime, Dennison first came to tell me, he said, look, we got an interest here in the very far offshore, the really deep far offshore. Nobody goes there, nobody has gone there yet. And this is really on the edge of what can be done technologically. And I said, let's get them in. And I'll tell you frankly, I was so kind of was of the spirit. I'm not sure if I said it. Look, comrade, let's get them in. And even if we got to waive the rentals for let's get them in because we want to have tenants in that area. It's in our interest to get a tenant in the area. So let's get them in. And I pushed. So we got them. So maybe I have to feel a bit responsible. But let me say also that I don't know specifically what has happened. I never went into it deeply, even in the time afterwards, as to the details of all the agreements. But generally, when we came into office, the PPPC in 1992, we met standard documents for all of these things that were prepared by the transnational group in which Maurice Oru was at the UN, and also by a group of the Commonwealth Secretariat. So that we had standard documents for forestry, for mining, for petroleum. And those which we were using, and those are what I'm aware of that we were using until maybe, and I presume those were the
but let's fast forward. Do you believe the contract is a bad contract, the current oil contract?
So what I'm saying there is that I would expect that those contracts conform with the standard forms of contract that Guyana received in the 1980s to 1990s from the UN and from the Commonwealth Secretariat. So that's what I'm saying, that the contracts that would have been entered into would have been standard contracts. I think that we may have to go over specifically what was said by our various people during the campaign and so on. Because everyone knows that initially, and I can tell you, initially I was being told by all sorts of advisors from bilateral and multilateral and others that Guyana in the 1980s, I was being told, 1990s, sorry, that we were demanding too much. That's why we weren't getting many people coming to develop our resources.
What was too much?
The same model, 5%, the royalty figures that we were having, the format that we were having, whatever it is, 2.5% royalty and 50% on the profit share, those models that we had received from thing, they said there's some places where you could vary. You could vary the levels of the royalty somewhat, and you could vary the percentage, and you could have a schedule where over time the percentage increases. You start at 50 and maybe you get 70% of the profits after a while. So they said we were using so whilst there's some variation, it's a general contract, there is some room for variation, but they were saying we were holding it too tight, and that's why the investors weren't coming. But I tell you, you may remember that in 2011, there were 3 wells to be drilled, and everybody was saying CGX is going to find oil this time, the people in Rupununi are going to find oil, and Repsol is going to find oil, so on. And everybody who was coming and tell me we were too demanding, then came back telling me, and these are advisors from US sent people and English and everybody, coming European, everybody. And they're saying now this time that, we're willing to help you look back at these contracts and so on. Because, they must have seen I was smiling, and they said, look, contracts are sacrosanct, you can't violate them. But maybe when you reread them, you may find that you don't have to give as much as you thought you had to give at the beginning. So I was saying that this was 2011. Of course, those 3 didn't turn out. And also you may recall that Shell was in the agreement with ESSO, and then they pulled out, I think, 2-3 years before the discovery, and Hess came in. So I'm pointing it out all to say that there's lots of risk involved, there's lots of money involved, and after the fact, everybody can say, this is it. If ESSO didn't find they'll find it, and they were walking away with, I don't know how much, $10 billion invested in no oil farm, everybody would have said, we all know there was no oil to be found there. But now everybody knows there was oil to be found. So, when you're in this area for some time, you tend to maybe be a little bit more stable and steady and not,
But Exxon found oil. And I know Mr. Jagan has signed a contract with them for 1%, but in 1999, but they did not find oil then. But they found oil, and the government increased the 1% to 2%, and telling the people we increased it by 100%. But nowhere in the world a contract has been signed by any company giving away a country's royalty at 2% range.
I would disagree with you.
So I'm asking you, is that royalty enough?
The format of the contract. If I think, and there was some letters in the papers, in Kaichur News too, from Tulsi Dayal Singh, that Guyanese doctor, a good friend of mine, a good friend of Guyana in Texas, and he made some initial evaluations of the performance of the contracts. And so there's the profit share part, and there is the royalty part. And there's always that. There's in the mining situation too. In mining, there's also that problem of the profit share and the royalty. So sometimes, and actually as has been said by people in our government, is that there is a time to switch from on a number of things. There's a time to switch from the people come and apply, and first who applies first gets served, to going to a wrong bid, an auction, where you say, I'm offering these properties at auction, and you strike the gavel, people make bids. And then there is also the time to change from profit share, mainly profit share, and only a small amount of royalty off the top, to a situation, no profit share at the other end, and a large amount of royalty. So what one has to look at is the amount of monies that come, the percentage of the sales price of the product that comes to the government. And one has to look at that final sum. All the pieces come together, and that's what one has to look at.
That sum is minuscule.
So it's not proper to compare 1 and 2% with 12.5%, because most of the times those 12.5% don't have any profit share. And if you take account of the profit share, we were getting at some times in that order, 12.5%, 13%.
But our profit sharing is lousy too. Anyway, Charles, let me put you over to my colleague. Charles, over to you.
Mr. Ambassador, I'm glad we're in this oil contract, because that's also part of what I really want to get clear up with you. I don't know if you read today's paper with Mr. Tom Sanzello. He's telling us, and he's an expert economics in oil and gas, that ExxonMobil, their management fee will be over $500 million by 2024. That's management fee only. In addition to that, the interest that they're charging on the loan that they give to the exploration company, the Shell company, that interest by 2024 will be almost the same amount that we're getting revenue. So when this government is telling us, and again, I believe this government really have the country at heart and they want to get things done. But I think, Mr. Ambassador, we are robbing ourselves of basic resource. Look, we look at a farmer in Essequibo recently. Since I was a little boy growing up in La Grange on the West Bank, Mr. Ambassador, the farmers, the dam from the farm to road was in mud. One tractor had to come to tow the other tractor. Today in 2022, it is still happening. We can't get our farm to road. Our farmers are trying their best, yet we're giving away billions and billions to Exxon. And as Dr. Rose mentioned, Mr. Ambassador, I'm not blaming you or the government, but I'm saying that we are giving away everything. We are getting the crumbs, and our country is still suffering. How long should the people of Guyana continue to do that, Mr. Ambassador?
Let me say, to make it clear, I want as much as I can get, as can be got for Guyana and the people of Guyana. Let's be clear about that. I want as much as we could get. But let me say it the other way. If there was no Exxon, there would be no other things done too. You know, when they came and they went offshore, deep offshore, nobody was really out there doing that kind of thing just yet. and you know the amount of money that is, and the knowledge and time it takes, and losses along the way to get to that point. What I think is and it is a point that I feel about is that it's very easy and maybe too easy to say they're paying themselves too much and so on. And let me say I want as much for me, but I want also for us to take that fact and use it to motivate us and all our people and demand that we make ourselves the best people we can be, so that maybe the next time, in the next life, we don't have to get a SO to come and look for this.
Okay.
Sure. We look for it ourselves, right? That's what I would like. But
All
also, just remember, we have people out there too. And look, we all go to the same school. We all go to the same school. I think we have a Guyanese guy who is a reservoir man of some age, maybe 20 years, with some company, one of the companies offshore. We have a Guyanese who is a reservoir expert. We have a young lady who's come up, I think those mining people is a daughter from that family. And I think she has been working either accidentally or not. SO had put her to work on the exploration program in Guyana. So I think we have to look at ourselves that we are also members in the world at large and the SOs, that our children want to be there. I mean, if I have a son now and a daughter, I want them to go and get as a geologist, go and get a job with SO, go and get a job with S or with, well, CNAC don't take on people just yet as far as we know, but maybe in time they will take on people. But we're looking for people to come and take jobs there. So let us, I like our people to experience the contradictions. There are contradictions.
Okay. All right.
And in fact, in electricity, Dr. Jagger, when we made the program and privatized, his idea was, and it was written in the document so, that in quick time, both the government and the core partner would start selling shares on the land. And Dr. Jagan wanted a situation where every Guyanese family had maybe 100 shares and were in a position of being both consumer and also owner. From the owner side, you have certain interests. From the consumer side, you have other interests. But the aim in life is to resolve those contradictions.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, I know.
So for us to advance, we have to get along the path of learning the two sides, learning the other side, and seeing how the contradictions could be resolved, how things could have been really different and better.
And I think your point is well taken, because Peter Digar mastered that when all his employees were given shares in the company. Mr. Ambassador, we mentioned the pipeline that will hopefully bring natural gas into Wales and so on. But I don't know if you were able to read the former Auditor General, Anand Gulsaran, report over the weekend, when he said the PDP has not been really a stellar performer of projects. I mean, he mentioned the Skeldon Estate, a white elephant, the debt has to be paid by the taxpayers. The one laptop computer has been a total fiasco. We spent all that money.
I disagree with that one. I disagree with the one laptop computer.
Well, we spent all that money and the computers are all broken. The airport has been there building since 2011, God knows when. 2022 is not yet done.
It's a much better airport now than everything.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, look at what happened to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is now heavily indebted, and maybe today's paper also, Ambassador Shamir Ali made a really nice presentation of what's happening in the Middle East. But China is putting us into a corner. We are borrowing. If an oil spill happens next year, Mr. Ambassador, and all our resources have to go to clean that spill, no funds is coming in, but our debt has to be repaid. And China, as you know what China does, China will come now and take your asset because that is their money. Are we heading to that direction? Should there be an oil spill and our revenues dried up?
I think you're mixing up two sets of things.
Okay.
The oil is SO, maybe. SO is operator, and therefore should probably take all the responsibilities.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, right? Mr. Ambassador?
China is a different story. You're mixing up things, man.
I agree. No, I agree. But Exxon has not given Guyanas enough insurance protection to cover any oil spill. $2 billion will not cover the oil spill.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the amount of money to cover the oil spill. And again, I would say that I can't exercise a good enough judgment. I would want to have some time out to go and read and look and think and make what is a good judgment. Because, as I said, whenever you make a decision, you're taking a path between a number of contradictory consideration or contradictory things. So it's not easy to make a decision and a judgment. And so I would need to go and really spend some time to look at it. But I see that there appears to be some movement on the side of ESSO recently. I noticed they just spoke about commitments to each area of operation and so on. It looks like there have been some movement in the direction that we wanted. It could be that it's a matter of clarification, because I see something that also said it's a matter of clarifying what has been committed to and what is to be expected, what other people commit to. You know, in many of these things, you have to read the total document before you start making sense, and you have to read it very, very carefully. So I would say I would say that my judgment has been that the people we have, the PPPC that we have working on these things, I would go with their judgment and their position. From past experience, I would go with them. You mentioned the sugar, the scaled up sugar. And let me say, at the time, all the noise in all the papers was to stop squeezing and go to diffusion extraction. And that design, as far as I know, was a design of the group that was managed. It was built by a Chinese contractor, but it was a design from people. And there are many things that after, when you put it into operation, that didn't play out. And to some extent, this is the story. They say you don't want to be too late into getting into new technology, but you find that when new technology first gets in, that there are a number of things that you have to learn or take more notice of that you weren't aware of before. And so I would say, yes, the unfortunately, or as it happened, Skeldon has added to the world's knowledge pool of design of plants that are based on extraction, diffusion extraction rather than expression. Certain things are more critical. When you go to diffusion, I've of those things in my illuminate plant days. You may think you know everything, but when you're there 20 years, you start knowing that you know the things you don't know about. You recognize the things you don't know about after 20 years of working. But in my first year, I thought I knew everything that there was to be known about bauxite processing.
Mr. Ambassador, I know time has run out on us, and we want to talk about Mr. Charles Sirius' report, Charles Sohan, when he talked about he believed that the stadium and the airport that the president recently announced might be another white elephant. But time has run out of us. We want to thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you sometime again. Is there anything you want to tell us in closing?
I want to encourage our people. I have no doubt that every one of us is as capable as any other human being. The difference is, to a large extent, our history seems to have put chips on our shoulder that restrains us from applying ourselves because we feel we can be discriminated against. So what? Apply yourself and get going. And we tend to sometimes not to be as generous as we should. Nothing wrong in being generous, even too generous, making people make fool of yourself. That's okay. We just at Easter think Christ was made a fool of, and so on and so on. So don't get too upset about that. Just do something, be as generous as you could, apply yourself as much as you could, make as many friends as you could. Don't take offense early, and things would things would start getting better. And I'm telling you more or less the path I trod from 1963 when you still had color issues in Guyana and in the USA, North America. There were many times when I could have got my back up even in Guyana and could have ended up on the other side, and could have ended up on the other side. But I'd like to encourage, and we have a challenge. This oil is more, I see it more as a challenge to us. We had a cloak for our sin before. We could say that we are what we are because we have no money. Now we have money. But half of the people who win lottos, they tell me 5-10 years later are worse off.
They're broke, yeah.
Mr.
Ambassador,
often take the easy road out.
Yeah.
You have to learn. You have to make yourself better. You become empowered by making yourself better. So you're a good surgeon or a good electrician or even a good housekeeper, a good person who could clean a house. We could tell a difference in a room that's been cleaned well and a room that isn't been cleaned well. And I could tell you that too. So we make ourselves as the best person that we could be. And that takes effort from within. And that takes a certain attitude to life, that life is good. And we're here with other people who are also trying to make their life good and happy. We could be generous to them, nice to them, kind to them, don't take offense early, apply ourselves. That's my message.
And Mr. Ambassador, we want to thank Mrs. Hines for taking good care of you because you're looking so well. And give her our regards as well.
And you could know that she dressed me here,
Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
Yes, I just want to make an announcement for one of our sponsors, Dave Narine. He is the czar of promoting cricket up the quarantine and throughout Guyana. He has been telling me that there's an under cricket team on Barbies versus Demar will be playing this coming weekend at number 69 Village. And the Essequibo President 11, which is all the three countries involved, will also be played this weekend. And on Sunday, that'll be played on Friday. And on Sunday, he's establishing what is called a Dave Barbies Second Division to get all the youths involved in cricket. He said he will have the president of the West Indies Cricket Board there and the Guyana Cricket Board and so forth. He wants to make cricket one of the biggest issue again in Guyana so that we can have more people, more cricketers in the West Indies team. And Dave Narine has been promoting this from day one. He's one of our sponsors. Thank you, Dave, for doing such a good job. And that's it for me tonight.
All right. So again, I want to thank all our viewers for staying with us. Happy Kite Flying Day. Happy Easter Monday. It's almost over there now. And for those who continue Ramadan, Ramadan Mubarak. And we'll see you next week again. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being with us again tonight.
Well, it's good to be with
Dr. Rose. To all our viewers, thank you. God bless.
Ambassador. Thank you.
God bless our great country of Guyana.
Thank you.